while since I did more of an educational video, but I was feeling a little bit inspired, so it's time to hop back in. Just a heads up, I am kind of experimenting with my microphones a little bit, so the sound in this might be kind of different than normal, it might be better than normal, it might be worse than normal, I'm not sure. Brands. It doesn't matter what style of fashion you wear, there is some sort of brand that caters to it. And even those of us in the alternative fashion community can't seem to get enough brand-labeled clothing. Even I am no exception to this rule. There are many pieces in my wardrobe that are in my wardrobe because of the label that's in it. That's not something that I like to admit to, but it's the reality of things. It's honestly a little bit odd when you step back and really think about it, that alternative fashion would be so brand obsessed. But it's also very clear that the alternative fashion community has a very interesting relationship with consumerism. Many alternative fashions were born out of very anti-capitalist ideals. Punk was created to rebel against the sort of nuclear family structure Christian morality of the 60s. Goth was created to rebel against the mall culture of the 80s. And even Lolita was created to rebel against the enforcement of women's sexuality in Japan. Personal autonomy and inclusivity have always been at the forefront of alternative fashion cultures. Compare this to the consumerist model of advertising and creating false needs in order to sell products. Consumerism enforces the idea that every single part of you has some sort of flaw in it that can be fixed with some sort of product. Whereas most alternative fashion is created with the intention of telling you that you are fine how you are, and the way that you present yourself is entirely up to your own choice. But even in the alt community, we love brand identity almost just as much as we love personal identity. I realize I'm moving pretty quick, so let's pause and define some terms that I'm going to be using a lot in this video. For the purpose of this video, we're going to call alternative fashion any fashion style that purposefully subverts mainstream fashion, especially contemporary fashion trends. So everything from the most extreme of the club kids to the most classy of the vintage revivalists. Consumerism is usually defined as the culture of promoting capitalism and the buying of selling of goods at any cost. It is also sometimes attributed to the business model of infinite profit, the idea that each year you should be generating more profit than the year before, which is a very unsustainable model. Consumerism is a very big topic, and it could honestly, it could be not just one video, but it could be many videos. It encompasses a lot of stuff. Consumerism is really anything from a YouTube haul where somebody has a link in their description for 10% off, to the more insidious examples of companies producing offensive products solely for publicity. It also encompasses ad campaigns. Brand identity is a term used in advertising to describe the social ideals that certain brand labels will align themselves with. Dolls Kill says it's for the rebels. Angelic Pretty says that it's for girls that dreamed of being fairy tale princesses when they were little. Brand identity, like consumerism, isn't always inherently bad, but problems arise when a brand's identity does not align with a brand's action. Alt brands frequently use the guise of being for everyone, even though many times alt fashion brands are just as bad and unethical and unsustainable as mainstream brands. This is just an advertising trick designed to part us with our own hard-earned money. I'll also be discussing conspicuous consumption, which is a bit more of a nuanced topic. I've done a whole video just on that in the past, but in essence, it is the act of presenting yourself in such a way that people can guess at your income. For example, choosing an item with a popular brand logo on it so that everybody around you knows how much money you spent on it. Part 1. Alt style versus alt brands. Undeniably, one of the most popular alternative fashion brands at the moment is Dolls Kill. One of the most controversial alternative fashion brands of all time is also, incidentally, Dolls Kill. From racist products to promoting drug culture, general art theft and the support of brands that commit art theft, their ableism, their promotion of stripper culture while simultaneously firing models for having been or currently being strippers or cam girls. I mean, honestly, the list just goes on. It seems like every month there's something new. And Dolls Kill has had controversy since the beginning. The whole time promoting an image of rebelliousness and being for everyone. And people in the alt fashion community still eat it up, to the point where many of their products sell out pretty quickly.
So we're almost inside, we're very, very close. There's the building right there. The line used to wrap around the side. Oh, we're moving. We might be going in, like now, I hope. So it really hasn't been too bad. We've only been here for like, it's 1 o'clock now, so we've been here for like an hour and a half or so. Really not too bad. Way less bad than apparently it was yesterday. So we've been in line for like 2 hours, but we're literally at the door.
All we want to do is spend money. That's just all we want to do.
At this point, I don't even care. I'll buy something just because I stood here this long. I don't even care if I want
it. Out of spite.
Out of spite.
Out of spite, I will give you my money.
Out of anger.
But we are excited to like be close.
Yeah.
Kelly's side.
I can hear music. I can smell plastic.
Not only is this brand still in business, but when I made my video about Dolls Kill last year, many of the comments were in support of the company. Dolls Kill is one of the most heinous examples, but they are far from being the only brand with less than stellar ethics that is heavily embraced by the alt fashion community. This puts the community in kind of an uncomfortable position. How do you promote alternative fashion and promote the spread of alternative fashion and the ideas associated with it? The idea that personal style is self-expression and that fashion can be art, and that you can wear whatever you want and express yourself however you want is not a bad thing. That is an idea that we should be spreading. But how do you do that without simultaneously promoting consumerism? The only way you can even really attempt to opt out of consumerism in 2020 is buying as little as possible and using what you already have until you can't use it anymore. That's true sustainability. But the sad reality is that brand labels get more clicks than DIY handmade items or secondhand outfits, and new release items will automatically generate more interest than new handmade items. Brand labels are just more searchable and more search engine friendly. It's easier to tag brand pieces, and it's easier to tag photos with brand pieces in them. And all of this makes it much easier to search for brand items than to search for handmade items. So it is entirely possible that slowing the consumption of alternative brand pieces can have the effect of slowing the spread of alternative fashion as a whole. That's the thing about slow fashion, it's slow. It's not particularly flashy. That's not to say that we can't spread alternative fashion without brands. After all, Lolita and EGL were entirely handmade fashions originally. Punk and goth were very DIY focused and very focused on upcycling thrifted garments. Vintage also heavily relies on DIY handmaking and secondhand purchases. But I will say that Pretty making the switch to angelic Pretty and going from selling this to this was kind of a game changer for Lolita fashion. And if that wouldn't have happened, Lolita fashion would probably look very different today, and Lolita fashion culture would probably also be very, very different today. On the flip side, would Lolita fashion be as popular as it is today and as it has remained despite the fact that it is no longer trendy in Japan? Brands have a level of power and reach that individuals just are rarely able to attain. Part 2. Sustainability. I've talked about fast fashion quite a bit on this channel, so I'm not going to rehash any of that here. This video is already going to be long enough. But it was only a matter of time before the fast fashion model bled over into alternative fashion businesses. I do want to preface that when I talk about sustainability on this channel, I want it to be clear that this is not a black and white topic. There are a lot of shades of gray, and most brands cannot be cleanly fit into the "this is good" box and "this is bad" box. There is a spectrum. So Context is really important when we discuss sustainability. But regardless, one hard true fact is that most waste is produced in manufacturing, and that's true for not just fashion, but really all goods. Most environmental damage is done by big corporations. So it's super important to be critical of the brands that you buy from. Your dollar is just as important as your vote. Brands will tell us about their PR and their new releases and their brand identities all day, but most of them are purposefully omitting information about their manufacturing. Advertising creates this illusion that brands like to hide their actual practices behind. And they're getting better and better at it all the time. I mean, heck, just look at H&M's greenwashing and their campaigns for sustainability that really do nothing but incentivize you to buy more, which is the inherently unsustainable thing in the first place. There are campaigns like Fashion Revolution and Clean Clothes, but these movements rarely extend to alternative fashion. So those of us who are in the alternative fashion community and want to dress more sustainably are forced to organize ourselves in order to spread information about different brands. And this gets super frustrating, especially when not all of us are on the same page about every single brand. This is especially true when it comes to J-fashion brands. Because how exactly do I, as an English speaker, email a Japanese-speaking brand? Such a nuanced question. And this language barrier issue has existed in the alt-fashion community for an embarrassingly long amount of time. And just imagine how different this would be playing out if we had a larger group of diverse individuals working to compile all of this information. I mean, we've been doing our best, but we can only do so much with the manpower that we have. And this highlights an important need to diversify sustainability media, and I mean that in more than one way. Black and brown voices have been largely excluded from the sustainability movement. I've noticed that the presence of greenwashed luxury brands and the commodifying of sustainability has presented this incredibly elitist, very wealthy, very white face to the sustainability movement. And POC are justifiably frustrated, especially when the most sustainable option is, and pretty much always has been, the cheapest option. Just buy less, just learn to do without. This is something that POC have been doing for generations, and yet sustainability media completely ignores them. And it's also no secret that most sweatshops are in underdeveloped nations, POC majority nations. Women of color make up a scary high percentage of sweatshop workers. Here in the States, most sweatshop labor is done in prisons, and I don't think I need to hash out the demographics on that one. I think most of us are well aware of the fact that most prisons are primarily made up of a certain demographic. You cannot accumulate vast amounts of wealth without exploiting somebody, and who do you think that normally ends up being? So when that alt-fashion brand says that its clothes are for everyone and they stand up for inclusivity, but also its clothing is made in Bangladesh, I have to raise my eyebrow at that. And this disconnect is purposeful. If you saw where your clothes were being made, you probably wouldn't be buying them. All brands love to pretend to be inclusive, they love to pretend to support their customers, but we have to ask, are they really supporting the community, or do they just see a niche market that they can grab a quick buck off of? And now, because we love irony on this channel, here are some corporate capitalists to advertise their goods to you. Part 3. Brand identity versus personal identity. I stated earlier in this video that alt fashions were founded upon the ideals of inclusivity and personal autonomy. Yet, it has the unfortunate side effect of existing within this consumerist model that values neither inclusivity nor personal autonomy. The issue with brand identity is that eventually it will come at odds with personal identity. In order to get you to want to buy a product, a brand has to convince you that you have a need that that product fills. At least enough so that you would be willing to part with your hard-earned money. You know, that thing that you use to put a roof over your head and put food in your mouth. The traditional way of doing this is through advertising. Commercials, billboards, that sort of thing. magazine layouts. However, in the age of social media, most fashion companies do not need to bother with traditional advertising. They get us to do it for them through conspicuous consumption. How many hauls have we all collectively watched this month? How many times have we tagged brands in personal selfies? We are living in the era of conspicuous consumption. I mean, we were all freaking out about logo tees in the early 2000s, but oh my god, it's so much more insidious now. And we're all guilty of this, everyone. Every single person watching this, I'm guilty of this, everyone. Now, that's not to say that all conspicuous consumption is inherently bad, and that there aren't any brands in existence that actively try to do good things. But all brands exist within our consumerist culture, and it's important to be aware of that, because even buying sustainable brands in excess is unsustainable. Unfortunately, this isn't the type of issue that ends with a flashy call to action, like boycott all brands or stop posting on social media, because doing either of those things wouldn't do any good either. I think it's just important to remember that alternative fashion is, in essence, fashion. It's clothes. And it faces the same issues as mainstream fashion. The obsession that alt fashion lovers have with brands is baffling at times, but I understand wanting to have nice things. I love it when alt brands create pieces that are made to last. And I also love the thriving secondhand culture that many alt fashions have provided. Wearing, say, a brand piece from 2004 that you stalked various different secondhand sites for multiple years in order to get the best deal on it, and then posting yourself wearing it on social media multiple times with the story of how you got it attached to it and coordinated multiple different ways to show that you are, in fact, getting as much use out of it as possible is a far cry from the fast fashion model. Even if this situation does count as conspicuous consumption, it's not all bad. Part 4. Conclusion. So why are we obsessed with brands? Advertising, media, the desire for the approval of our peers that's hardwired into our DNA? I mean, there are lots of reasons. It's not a negative thing to occasionally want to treat yourself, but buying multiple new items every week, every month, that's behavior that we should probably be thinking about. There are so many reasons why we would want to own brand pieces, and why we would want to tag brand items in our photos, and why we want to get a lot of likes on our photos. That's kind of just how our brains interact with our present culture. Even if we know the scale is rigged and the rules are made up, we just want the clout. I don't know what it is, what part of the human brain makes you feel superior when you have a certain brand label in your clothing, but I know that it's real, and I don't think anything short of a shift in our culture is going to change that. Because from the day we are born, we are taught to value brands. When you're a toddler and you're watching cartoons and the ads pop out of all the cool kids drinking Coca-Cola and wearing Converse, you learn that cool kids drink Coca-Cola and wear Converse. So when you're drinking Sam's Club and wearing Airwalks, you don't feel as cool. And we're so used to this mindset that it affects other aspects of our lives. If you had the choice, would you go to a Lolita fashion meetup wearing Bodyline, or would you go to it wearing Angelic Pretty? If somebody just gave you one of the dresses for free and you didn't have to think about it, which one would you choose? I mean, seriously. I'm gonna take a wild guess and assume that most of you picked the second one because I sure as heck would. And as much as I hate to admit it, it feels good to have things that other people want. It feels good to be a subject of envy and admiration. It feels good to hold the attention of your peers. So we peacock a little with brand labels. Believe me, I'm a YouTuber. We are a breed that is well acquainted with wanting attention. Unfortunately, this is an issue with few solutions. We're gonna have to get a little creative here, I think. Obviously, try to buy less overall, but I think what we really need, as a society, is just an overall recontextualization of our relationship with things. We need to rethink how we interact with consumerism. Are we spreading positive messages with our purchases? Or is our wallet just following our desires for endorphins? This is just food for thought. I will have some resources in the description for some further information on some of these topics. That's all that I have for today's video. I hope everybody has a good day, and I will see you all next time. Bye! And please, let me know if the audio on this was better or worse, because sometimes I genuinely can't tell.